Welcome to Mikab Model College online tutorial. We hope at the end of this lesson, you will have acquired the expected learning outcome. Sit down and listen attentively as we introduce your subject teacher.
Welcome again to our new lesson topic for today. Remember, I still remain your biology teacher, Ibrahim Samson. In our previous lesson, we introduced ourselves to the kingdom Animalia. And we say that we have 9 phyla in this kingdom, starting with the phylum Porifera. So, in today's lesson, we are going to take a look at a brief characteristics of this animal group that is known as phylum Porifera. Please watch out. In this particular group of organisms that we call Porifera, they are popularly known as the sponges. The sponges. Now, what can we say about the existence, the life form, and every other thing about this group of animals? Well, actually, they are multicellular, but at the same time, they are also the most primitive of the animal kingdom. They are the most primitive. Another thing about this animal group is that you can always find them in an aquatic environment. They live in water. That is where they spend their whole life. And so, some of them can be found in marine environment, some of them in fresh water. We are going to see some examples later. Like we said in our previous lesson, that one of the reasons why animals have to be grouped into various categories or phylum is the very fact that animals do not have the same level of organization. So the most primitive of the first level of organization of life is the cellular level. And so this group of organisms known as Porifera or the sponges, they are living at the cellular level of organization. Then, like I said before, they are all aquatic, marine, and some of them are found in fresh water. Again, you also know that we talked about body symmetry. For the fact that animals are having different body symmetry, it cannot make them to be grouped together as one. So this group of organisms known as the Porifera, their bodies are asymmetrical, meaning you cannot divide them into equal parts or dividing their body parts either symmetrically into 2 by means of bilateral symmetry or radial symmetry. Their body is asymmetrical. What about their body shape? We are going to show you some examples of these organisms later. You will notice that this group of animals have different body shapes. Some of them have the shape of the flower vase in your house. Some of them are round-like. Some of them are sac-like. Even some of them are cylindrical or looking like tubes. They have 2 body layers. This will remind you of one of the points which we use in justifying the reason why there should be a division or classification of animals into different phyla. These organisms actually are having 2 body layers, and that is known as what? Diploblastic. Very good. Diploblastic. So, diploblastic body layer or animals, they are animals that their body layer is 2. So we are going to learn about this particular group later. However, one good thing you should notice about this group of organisms called the sponges or the Porifera is that their outer layer is known as dermal layer, but the inner one is known as what? Gastra layer. I have told you before, whenever you hear the word gastra, you should always think about the gastric system or the stomach. So that means the layer that is functioning as if it is a stomach. That is what we mean by the gastra layer. Then the kind of cells we have in the gastra layer and the dermal layer are different from the one we have in between them. Because in between these 2 body layers, there is what we call gelatinous non-cellular mesoglia that is in between the gastra layer and then the dermal layer. So because we have different group of cells in between them, that is why we cannot call it a middle layer. So they also have many pores. Like I said, we will show you an example. And when you take a look at the body structure of this, a typical example of Porifera, you will see that their body pores are having their body structure is having many pores around them. Pores simply means holes through which things, liquid, fluids, and other materials will be entering into the body. So these pores are known as ostia. But one thing is that they have a common opening. So these ones too, even if you want to talk about digestive system in this group of organisms, although they don't have digestive system because they still live at the cellular level. But if you want to talk about digestive system in this particular group, you can rightly say that they have incomplete digestive system. Because why? As you're going to see later, you see that they only have one opening, and that is at the mouth region, which we call osculum. So then the body cavity is known as sphingocele. That is the hole. You know, as a human, our own cavity now, our own body cavity, that is where our stomach is. We call it abdomen sometimes. So, but in the case of this animal group, their own body cavity is known as sphingocele, and it contains various cells. Now, there is a name we call all the cells. We are going to mention this name later, which is choanocyte. These animals lack sense organs. Unlike you and I, that we have eye, we have nose, we have ear, we have skin, and the rest of them. Because these animals are actually still existing at the cellular level, so we don't expect them to have sense organ. Then they carry out a sexual form of reproduction by means of budding and fragmentation. I am going to, by the time I show you the picture, I'm going to explain to you how they carry out this asexual form of reproduction by means of budding. But some of them do carry out sexual reproduction, and that is going to be by means of what? Gametic fusion. Fusion refers to two cells, the nuclei of two cells fusing up or coming together, which we call fertilization. Then their cells are called choanocytes. You can also call it collar cell, like I told you before. And these cells are lined in their body cavity, which is known as the sphingocele. The freshwater forms are usually called spongilla, but we still have some other forms of sponges that we call Leucoselenia, the Cycon, and what? Eupictella. Yes, Eupictella. Here are some of what these animals actually look like. So right now I want to introduce to you some examples of this animal group that we call Porifera, the phylum Porifera. I told you earlier that this animal group actually have different body shapes or body forms. As you can see in this picture, this one has the shape of a tube or of a cylinder. So this one has a cylindrical shape. Then this one is sac-like in nature. If you take a look, a very close look at this sac-like organism, you can see various holes. This is what we call ostia earlier. Then there is what we call osculum, which is the common mouth that they will pass food in, and then food will also pass out. Now, if you take a look at the hole here, this is what we call osculum. I'm still going to show you another example. Then take a look at this group now. You can see it very well. So some of them are actually having a vase-like shape. So now let's go further and see. Good. These are still part of the examples of sponges that I showed you earlier. This one has the shape of a sponge. Yes. Then this is the one we call Eupictella the other time. This is the animal group we call Leucoselenia. Yes. And this one is known as the Scypha or the Cycon group of organism. But if you take a look at the body format of a typical Porifera, this is how their body plan looks like. Up here, you see what we call osculum. So, but by the side of the body, around the whole body, you have some tiny holes. You can see it in all the various parts of the body. This is what we call ostia. All these tiny holes are what we call ostia. But each of them is called ostium. When there are many, you say ostia. So now, this is just one of the branches of the whole organism as a whole. So now, this one body, this single body alone, we can just call it a bud. It's like it budded like the whole, from the whole body of animals. So it carries out asexual form of reproduction by budding, in that when this part actually, which buds out, actually grows, it will grow to become a fully matured sponge. And later on, it will now detach itself, which is known as fragmentation. It will fragment itself or detach itself and then goes to continue living on its own. So this is how a typical body or body plan of Porifera actually looks like. Then inside, this is the outer part of the body now, but inside we call it what? The spongocele. This is the inner wall, which is the spongocele. This spongocele is the empty space that is inside this, or the body cavity, the inner cavity, which we call spongocele. So, but lining this spongocele are cells that we call choanocytes. The cells are called choanocytes. So the choanocytes are actually lining this spongocele. So, but the outer layer is known as what? Very good. You can still remember. So we call it the dermal layer. But the inner layer, we call it what? The gastral layer. This gastral layer, as well as the outer layer, they consist of those cells we call choanocyte or the collar cells. But in between the dermal layer as well as the gastral layer, we have small vacuum or small layer in between it that is containing gelatinous cells which are non-living in their own. So that is why we cannot say this animal is actually having three-body plan. So this is a typical example of a leucocellular now that we have just used as an example of Porifera. So these are still some other examples. As you can see, this one look like the vase in your house. Is that also? This one look like the examples we have given earlier on. So remember, we said that these organisms, some of them, majority of them live in marine, although they are all aquatic, but few of them are actually fresh water forms. So we are rounding up now, but what have we learned so far? We have just introduced ourselves to the first group of the animal kingdom, known as the Phylum Porifera. We have seen what a typical Porifera looks like. It looks like a sponge. And if you also remember from the pictures we saw, these sponges actually have various body forms. Some of them look like a flower vase that we have in our homes. Some of them have the shape of a tube or a cylinder. So from this, we also notice that the body forms actually have what we call tiny holes or pores that are called ostia. When those animals are feeding, remember they are inside water, it is possible for water to bring some food particles into them. So they will filter. The water will take those particles into the body of these sponges via the ostia. So, but after filtering it and then sieve the food particles out of it, the water will now go out through the osculum, which you see at the top of the body of that organism. We have also come to know now that this group of organisms are actually the most primitive. But what do we look forward to in our next lesson? We are going to take a look at the second group of the kingdom Animalia, that is the phylum Ascomyntes. So by the time we are looking at this, you will notice part of the things that make this group of organisms we are going to study to be different from the ones we have just studied so far. So on that note, I say good day, and please keep on subscribing to this lesson so that you'll be able to get more lessons that you'll be able to enjoy at your home. Thank you.